Notwithstanding the professor's claim that this is somehow politicizing, nothing could be further from the truth. The fact is, this subcommittee and the entire committee has clearly been on this subject for a long time, but it vacillates. As the ranking member would often state, forget about competition abroad. I'm talking about the subcommittee ranking member in this case. Let's just go ahead and focus on American companies. Nothing could be more inappropriate. President Trump is the first president in a very long time to ask, what is the relevant market? 3 out of our 4 witnesses understand. The relevant market in antitrust is now the world, and in tech it is the world. And when countries like Korea, Australia, most of Europe, countries that we have, and Brazil for that matter, we considered allies, in fact, use their vast market power, not always in that product, but their vast market power as sovereign nations to, in fact, adversely affect our competitiveness. It doesn't matter, and I'll go on the record, it doesn't matter if you have a 100% market share in the United States and a 100% global market share as an original innovator. If, in fact, foreign nations, in jealousy or simply not wanting to, in fact, allow these unicorns to exist, in fact, use their market power to stop you. That is what's going on, often with our closest allies. Notwithstanding, I'll just quote one, and I'd like it put up behind me. Chairman Zhou of the Korea Free Trade Commission. That's a wonderful title. In his own words, disparages America, takes us down, and in fact, his commission, as this board says, and I'd ask unanimous consent that the entire article be placed in the record, says, so why are many Americans, especially white workers in the Rust Belt in the Midwest, so angry? I'll tell you why they're so angry. As somebody born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, in somebody who happily went to work for the Trump administration because, in fact, they believed in free and fair trade, something that we had talked about but always left the second half off. The fact is, we now have to take on the status quo of global competitiveness. China, but also our allies. Europe, one of our closest partners, including Australia, in fact, are operating in unfair trade practices. The Digital Markets Act is just one in which every unicorn in that field is American, and as innovators, and they as regulators, they intend on using regulation to take us out of our competitive lead. Let there be no doubt, there are additional barriers, and they are not new. I know that the testimony we are receiving today is important, but I'm just going to give you one piece of testimony. More than 40 years ago, I began traveling the world and doing international business. More than 30 years ago, I was in South Korea for a trade conference. The highest level of management at that time, both government and at the Samsung and the other majors, proudly said to the delegation that had gone there, we're so delighted to have you here. We want you to, in fact, come here and invest, transfer your technologies, and enjoy the benefits of our ability to make your products. He didn't even listen to himself. They were not interested in buying our products. They were not interested in joint ventures. They were interested in technology transfers. Even when they manufacture in the United States, Hyundai and Kia, they won't even obey our rules, and in fact will illegally bring in their own workers, which has recently been found by this administration. So I normally ask a lot of questions. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions this time. I'm going to thank our witnesses. I'm going to, because you raised your hand, go to Professor Portuguese, because you do want to say something, and I'd like to hear it. Quickly.
Thank you very much. I want to revert back to the point that you made about relevant markets, because that's at the basis of antitrust principles. In order to look at if companies abuse their positions, we look at first you have to define the relevant market. We cannot call companies monopolists if we haven't defined relevant market. And you said that the relevant market today is the world. That is true. I just want to add that also the relevant market is not online or offline. These companies compete both with other online platforms, but they compete with also offline groceries and other things. So the idea of first insulating what we call digital market is wrong-headed. There's no such a thing as digital market. There are markets. And digital is just a means of distribution to the consumers. So when digital platforms compete, digital advertising competes with print advertising. Digital supermarkets compete with groceries offline. And so the competition is much larger than what we can think.